welcome to a special edition of Inside Boxing Weekly on The Grueling Truth. We are brought to you by, as always, of course, Retired Boxers Foundation. I'm your host, Mike Goodpaster, and I want to welcome to the show tonight a man by the name of Daniel Sisneros, who wrote the book Mat Tales, True Stories from the Bizarre, Brutal World of Pro Boxing. How you doing, Daniel?
Hey, Mike. Doing good. Thanks for having me on.
All right, now, when we have the boxers on, I always ask the same thing. When did you get your love for boxing? And just take us through a little bit there, because usually it comes in the childhood era, but maybe just talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. As a kid, my dad wasn't big into team sports and all that, but he loved boxing and wrestling. And I grew up in the Los Angeles area, so, we used to watch the boxing from the Olympic Auditorium. And I think that's where the love came. That was a connection my dad and I had. That of all the things, that was the one thing that we could really connect well on. And he kind of put that into me. And, man, it was just, I guess it's in the blood. I remember when the Ali Frazier fight was going to happen. And all the kids in the neighborhood were talking about it, and it just went from there. And I just had a natural love for boxing, Mike.
Yeah, and actually we share similar stories, because I was the same thing. I remember growing up watching the fights with my dad, and then like now, you actually got to watch big fights on live over-the-air TV. Heck, I remember you'd get Hagler Anna Fermo. I think it was, Leonard Benitez on the same card, and Marvin Johnson, Victor Galindez.
Oh, yeah. Boy, I wish it was like that again. I don't think we'll ever see that era.
I don't think we have enough. I don't think we have enough quality boxers to actually put a card like that on anymore.
Or at least not enough quality boxers that'll fight each other, too.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that seems to be a prevailing problem anymore. Where did you come up with the idea for the book?
Okay. Well, boy, this goes back. I love boxing, but I also love the Disney parks, Walt Disney World and Disneyland. I know it doesn't connect, but I'll put it together in a second here. This gentleman had a website. It was a Disney website, but somehow he had found me, and that I loved boxing and Disney, and he proposed that I do a column called Disney Tale of the Tape, and I would match up, I know this sounds ridiculous, I would match up Disney, like, rides and experiences, and match them up in a boxing match format. And, I would write a column about two different rides, Space Mountain versus, Splash Mountain, and we'd have different categories would be the different rounds, and so, it was kind of a fun thing. It was more of a Disney-type thing. And then he asked me to write a book based on the column, and I did that. My first book was Disney Tale of the Tape, Theme Park Boxing, and it did pretty good. So that was with a company. His company was called Theme Park Press. He branched off and he started Pulp Hero Press, and he said, "Hey, Dan, how would you like to write an actual boxing book?" And I said, "Well, that'd be awesome." I said, so I started trying to think, what could I write about that I kind of know about and could do. And that's where the idea came from. I told him I have this massive collection of boxing on videotape and DVDs, and I can go through it and find some crazy, weird, funny, unusual happenings in boxing. I pitched it to him, and he loved it. He said, "Let's do it." So that's how the book came to be.
Now, the first thing I notice on the cover is the foreword written by Mike Weaver, former WBA heavyweight champion. We had Mike on the show 4 or 5 months ago. He's a great guy. You want to talk a little bit about the process to get Mike to come aboard and write the foreword?
Yeah. I mean, I just started thinking, who has been involved in some crazy, happenings in boxing? And Mike Weaver's had a few of them, and I just took a gamble and I just reached out to him, and I just asked him if he would consider it. And I was pleasantly surprised at how friendly and, helpful he was. And he was right on it. I mean, I said, I'm going to need it by this certain time. Boom. He would just, I would ask him a few questions and he would send me. And he wrote up a nice little foreword. And that's how it happened. I just, I back in the days when I was just a kid or a young man watching boxing and Mike Weaver was a world champion and I was just a big fan, of boxing, I never dreamed one day that he would actually, be working with me on a project like this. So it was a great honor to have Mike write the foreword for me. And man, he's just a great guy, and I really, really appreciate him very much.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I've found with, we've got a Legends show for boxing, baseball, all these sports. But I think the guys that are most down to earth, and really, I can only count one or two boxers out of a couple hundred that we've interviewed that were not nice guys. And I think that's what makes this so great is when you write something like this, if people in the boxing world know who you are, it's no problem to get in touch with these guys to talk to them either.
Oh yeah, I have found that absolutely to be true. I was a pro boxing judge for 10 years with the New Mexico Athletic Commission, and we did a lot of, not real big shows would come to town, but when a little bit bigger show, when HBO or ESPN would come to town, some of the bigger name boxers would come in, and it was so exciting to meet these guys, and it was so just a pleasant surprise to find out how receptive, how friendly these guys were. Alexis Arguello, Ray Mancini, these guys would just, you didn't feel like you were bothered. At least I didn't feel like I was bothering them, and they were just so friendly, and it was really a pleasant surprise. And so that's one of the beautiful things of the sport. You can catch the guys on the way up and catch them on the way down, and they're more than happy to spend some time with you.
All right, so when you did this, there had to be something, even before you went to the videotape, a fight that jumped out like, I'm going to have to write about this one. Was there anything like that stood out that right away you knew this was something that was going to be included in the book?
Yeah, I'd give it some thought. And there was one, it's one of the shortest little chapters. I think it's like one page. And it was just a small little thing, but it really, it stuck in my mind. And that one was called Real Talent. And it was about this boxer, Alvin Hayes. He came into the Forum in Los Angeles to fight. They had a Stroh's Beer held a boxing tournament there. And, it was televised. And Jimmy Lennon Sr. was the ring announcer. And this guy, Alvin Hayes, he was tall and skinny, and he kind of, funny looking, because he'd like to put on an act, and he came into the sound of Michael Jackson's Billie Jean. And he was doing a Michael Jackson impersonation in the ring. It was hilarious. This guy was, I'm like, oh my, and Jimmy Lennon was trying to do the introduction. He couldn't pull himself together because he was laughing so much. And I don't know, I always remembered that, and that was one of the first things I said, I've got to squeeze that in. And it was just a short little thing, but that stood out in my mind. But the crazy stuff, there was quite a bit to choose from. I ended up with 32 chapters in the book, and I'd say the Fan Man is probably, one that everybody knows about, and that was just, did you see that one happen live, Mike?
Yeah, actually, I was at a bar in Cincinnati, Ohio with my dad watching the fight when it happened, and I was a huge Holyfield fan. And that was really surreal because nobody really knows what's going on. Nobody knows if the guy has a weapon or something. And then all of a sudden you see all Bo's cornermen jump in and just start beating the hell out of him, which is a precursor for one of the other weirdest moments, which was Bo Galata.
Exactly. Riddick Bowe was in a few of these, and there's some that I left out that'll probably make the second book. Riddick Bowe just,
anytime, what was the Rock Newman? Anytime Rock Newman's involved, some crazy stuff's going to happen.
Exactly. You'll see Rock Newman hanging onto somebody's neck or pulling somebody out of the ring. What a pair. But that Fan Man, I remember that too. And I remember we had a house full of people at the, watching the fight on pay-per-view. And when it happened, like you said, nobody really knew what's happening. What is this? Can you imagine being the people at ringside? And I would think, am I in danger here? What the heck's going to happen? And then when Bo's people just went crazy, started hammering this guy, that was just an unforgettable, bizarre moment. It was perfect for the book.
Yeah, and then you fast forward to Bo Galata 1 at Madison Square Garden. That had to make the book too, didn't it? I'd imagine both Bo Galatas made the book.
Yes, they did. Yeah, that's. I ended the book with those two, chapter 30, and then I had another one in between, and then 32. The very ending is the last meeting between Bo and Galata. Yeah, that was. If it wasn't the most bizarre thing, I think it was just the most just scary, dramatic, crazy. And I had Randy Gordon, who was the commissioner for the New York Boxing Commission at the time, and I think he was. I don't know if he was the commissioner at that time, but I know he was a former New York State Athletic Commissioner, and another boxing historian, a friend of mine, Robert Silva, and they were both present for that. So they gave some of their thoughts, and boy, when they returned my questionnaire and they returned it, and it sounded so. They both were there, and they had the same story. It was scary. It was the most terrifying thing. Randy Gordon's wife ended up, I think they ran to safety somewhere, and she was in tears, and they both felt, threatened for their lives. And that, I don't think even the television broadcast on HBO, really portrayed how frightening it must have been to be there. That was pretty crazy. It just again, perfect for the book.
Well, the thing I remember about the HBO broadcast was at the end of it where Jim Lampley's trying to wrap it up quickly, and then in tears says that he has a teenage daughter in the arena and he has to go make sure that she's safe.
Yeah, I remember that, and that's in the book too. And that, that just kind of gave you the feeling of how terrifying it must have been. There's another chapter, a couple of chapters in the books where there are riots that happened in Albuquerque, New Mexico, when I was an official. And so I wrote about those. So I can kind of, relate to how it feels to be in the middle of something like that.
You didn't have anything to do with causing those riots, right, Daniel?
Oh, no, absolutely not. Other than almost, getting ready to get under the table. But, my dad was, for one, I was doing the broadcast. I used to do the color commentary for boxing on CBS 13 here in New Mexico for statewide television, and there was a fight it's in the book between Charles Poison Anaya and Rudy Bad Boy Lovato. Bad Boy, that's the perfect name, and it got out. It was a heated battle going in. There was a lot of they both wanted to be the king of Albuquerque, I guess. And so I was doing the broadcast. My dad was with me, but he was in the audience somewhere. And when things erupted, somebody threw a Pepsi bottle at Rudy and hit him in the shoulder, and all heck broke loose. And so I can relate to what Lampley was feeling worrying about his daughter, because I was thinking, my dad's, I think he was maybe 78 years old back then. And I'm just looking into the crowd, where is he? Is he okay, And he was, but it was a really scary thing. There was just stuff breaking out all over the place. All of the New Mexico commissioners were not at their table because they had all gone under the ring to get out of the chaos, So I know the feeling, and it's pretty scary. But that thing at Madison Square Garden, that's just, I think there was gunshots and, it was bodies flying everywhere. That was wild.
Yeah, and then you brought up Bo Galata too. The thing I remember from watching that fight is that fight from Galata's ring walk with the Polish music, and I don't know, there was kind of cloud. I don't know if it's smoke or whatever. I think that was at the Taj Mahal in Atlantic City. But that entire night was kind of surreal, kind of like out of Hound at a Baskervilles or something.
Yeah, because, just imagine, after what had happened, I can't hardly believe they would do that fight again. But I guess they were really well prepared with security this time. And, no, there was no riot, but Andrew Galata's, actions are just, I still just can't, how do you explain something like that? What is it with this guy? He just snaps. But, it seems like that would have been the end of his career, but he went on to fight for many years after that. So I don't know, but that was just another.
But the thing here is this: it's just like Oliver McCall. Guys like that are guys that need help. They shouldn't be in a ring. But you got promoters, like the Don Kings, that want to get paid, and they'll put a guy in. They don't care as long as they're getting their pockets lined.
Oh yeah, and in fact, the worse things get, the more they like it, because it's going to draw interest. Like Oliver McCall's breakdown fight with Lennox Lewis is in the book. And that was bizarre. Could you imagine that? The guy's just walking around the ring, weeping, and poor Lennox Lewis is do I knock this guy out or pat him on the back and say, hey, it's okay, you know? It's like,
Go give him a hug.
Exactly. You know?
And the bad thing is for Lennox Lewis, if you remember the first fight, Oliver McCall basically closes his eyes and just swings and knocks him out. So you know Lennox Lewis thinks maybe it's a ploy and he's going to take a swing when he gets close to him.
Oh, exactly. You know, he's like thinking, what do I do here? You know, I mean, I thought, I mean, you know, and again, Oliver McCall came out of that. Okay, he had plenty of big fights after that, you know, so, but it was just a bizarre night, and I never seen anything like it. So that one had to make the book, you know.
All right, now what about stuff that doesn't happen in the ring? Because, you know, a lot of people don't know Trevor Berbick and Larry Holmes rematched their fight from the early 80s. That was just an unbelievable thing that really happened. I mean, and if you like WWE wrestling, this is right up your alley. Can you imagine Larry Holmes in I forget exactly what age he was. He's a little older, you know, in a jogging suit running across the tops of limousines and you know, doing a double leg drop kick on Trevor Berbick. Just crazy, you know, it's just crazy. But Berbick had come in there and started shooting his mouth off and, you know, saying things about Larry Holmes and his wife, and Larry just wasn't having it. So Larry Holmes, you know, he won the rematch because he did a pretty good job on Trevor Berbick. Yeah, Larry was fearless.
He is crazy and fearless. I love that, man.
Yeah, he's a great guy. Had him on a few months ago, too. He's funnier than hell, too. And as long as you're straight with him, you'll have no problem. I just think that he gets in trouble because he just says what's on his mind, and if you don't like it, he doesn't really care. Yes,
he does, and that's, I feel the same way about Larry Holmes. He's one of my favorites. I've never met him or spoken to him, but I've always respected him, and you know, like you said, he says it like you know, he's just going to say it, and if you don't like it, tough. And I give him all the credit for that, and I think he's one of the great champions, you know, and well, considering the way he had to fight out of Muhammad Ali's shadow, you know, even with that, to do the great things that he did, I think he's one of the all-time greats, and I sure appreciate him.
All right, and another one you talked about was outside the ring. It was a press conference before the great Hagler-Hearns fight, the 8-minute war there in 1985, I believe it was.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that press conference?
Yeah, the Prophet of Doom, and that was, I think that one was in Los Angeles, and it was just funny because, you know, Hagler was kind of quiet. He's just kind of sitting there with a smile on his face, really confident. And Tommy Hearns, you know, I mean, I never really thought of Tommy Hearns as a big talker. You know, he's a confident guy, and neither one of these guys were big talkers. But I guess they were kind of being pushed by the promoters. Hey, you know, we really got to spice this thing up. So Hearns gets up there and he's, you know, saying I can count to 3 and this and that. And he's saying 1, 2, 3 and tapping on the podium. And then he says, and then I'm going to add 4. And he stands back and he's, you know, swinging in the air, bam, ba bam, ba bam, ba bam. You know, and everybody's looking at each other like, what's this guy doing? And he made a prediction, you know, you're going down in round 3 or whatever the round. He called the round right, but
yeah, just the wrong person going down.
It was the wrong person. But so Marvin Hagler was the true prophet of doom. Yeah, but that was a fun little moment that a lot of people may not have seen. But yeah. I wanted to put that one in the book too.
And another one, we'll be wrapping it up pretty quick because I know you're a busy man since you retired.
No problem. This is fun. This really is fun.
But the other one that stood out to me is Roberto Duran was always one of my favorite fighters until he lost me a good $10 when I was in 4th, 5th grade by tapping out Sugar Ray Leonard. But yeah. I think that 1980, most people think his performance against Leonard, the first fight, was his greatest performance. To me, it was 1989 against Iran Barkley, and the reason that is Iran Barkley was a man that knocked out Thomas Hearns not once but twice, and was a super middleweight at 168, and Duran is maybe the greatest lightweight of all time at 135, and he goes up, and I mean he was hurting Barkley, and he wins a decision in a great fight. I know that fight. I think it was a blizzard that night at Atlantic City. But you want to talk a little bit about that fight? Because I know that's in the book also.
Yeah, and again, it was Randy Gordon who helped give a few thoughts because he was present at that one too. yeah, I mean, really Roberto Duran had to be the underdog. He was the crowd favorite, of course. He was the house was alive with Duran fans, but man, he was outsized. Age-wise and everything. And like you said, he's an all-time great at lightweight. But here's this, monster really, and this guy that has, defeated Tommy Hearns, who destroyed Duran. You know how it is. You think that if A beats B and B beats C, then then A can beat C, but it doesn't work that way. And that was the night that was just, like you said, I agree with you 100%. One of the greatest performances. I mean, I was shocked. I almost didn't want to look because what's going to happen to poor Roberto Duran, against this powerhouse brute, Iran Barkley. But it turned out to be a great fight, and yes, Duran, one of his greatest moments. And then at the end of the fight, though, the thing that kind of, not just the fight, but Michael Buffer goes to announce the winner, and everybody's on pins and needles because it's a razor-thin decision, and the microphone wouldn't work, and there's no house mic, and Buffer's panicking, and the people are panicking, and so finally they made the decision, hey, just yell it out. So he just cups his hands, and he's screaming at the top of his lungs the decision, and the people in the front can hear him, but the ones way in the back of the arena can't. But you could tell by the reaction of the people in the front who the winner was. And so what a great night of boxing that was. That's just an instant classic. And man, I give Duran credit. He did it when people thought he couldn't.
Yeah, and another fight that bothered me when I watched it, I think this guy got arrested for it too, was the sucker punch, James Butler and Benjamin Grant.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I almost, I wasn't sure if I even wanted to write that one because it's just what an ugly incident, But yeah, the sucker punch. What can I say? It was just, I mean, if you put yourself in Richard Grant's shoes and he's happy and, celebrating, yeah. He thinks the guy's coming to give him a hug and he reaches out to put his arm around him and they get bare-fisted hit in the mouth like that. And it was brutal, just an ugly moment. But it belongs in the book. It is after all, it is the bizarre and brutal world of pro boxing. And that was one of the more brutal things that ever happened, and, it's memorable. It's a big part of boxing history, so of course it had to make the book.
And we'll wrap it up with a fight I watched on USA Tuesday Night Fights, Crawford Grimsley. And for what I remember this fight, I think Grimsley came in maybe as the favorite because James Thunder was a guy that, let's face it, the more you saw him, especially against better competition, he usually lost. Every once in a while he'd get a big win. And I know Sean O'Grady was on the show. Sean's a great guy. He was on a few months ago. So I had to bring up a Tuesday Night Fights or another Tuesday Night Fights here. But if I remember right, that's a fight where if you even stood up and looked away, you missed the fight.
Yes. In the book, actually, it's titled Don't Blink because it was just an instant knockout. And Jimmy Thunder was he was kind of a guy, he had kind of gone pretty high up and he's trying to hang on, and kind of rebuild his career a little bit, and Crawford Grimsley was kind of an unknown guy, but he had just fought George Foreman and gone the distance, so you figure, man, this guy's, he could take a shot.
China?
Yeah, you mean the Grimsley-Foreman fight?
Yeah.
I think that was
wasn't Tommy
in
Morrison
Japan.
On the undercard in that fight?
Yeah, I think Tommy Morrison fought, I can't remember who he fought, but yeah,
he knocked
I think that's the one.
out quick, I think, didn't he?
Yeah, I don't think it was Marcus, was it Rode? I don't remember, but yeah, that was, it was either in Japan or China. I thought it was in Japan, actually. It might have been in Osaka. I can't remember for sure. But yeah, the Grimsley-Foreman fight you're talking about.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, and so Grimsley had gone the distance with Foreman, and Thunder was, like you said, well, Thunder's performances were a little bit, they were up and down, so, but when they clashed, like you said, don't look away. Well, don't even blink because, I mean, the guy just walks forward, launches a bomb, and the fight is over. And the weird thing is, Crawford Grimsley's on his back, and he's still throwing punches.
Yeah,
and fainting and dodging. Remember that?
Yeah.
And Sean O'Grady's just saying, "Oh my gosh, look at this guy. He thinks the fight's still going." It was crazy. I mean, I felt sorry for Grimsley, but he got up and he was okay. But what a memorable event that was. That was a very memorable fight. It had to make the book too.
Now, see, do you have a Matt Tales 2 coming out?
I'm working. Yeah, actually, Mike, I am. The publisher is pretty happy with the first one, so he said, let's do it again. So I'm actually just starting to get to work on the second one right now, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of the bouts I'm working on right now.
All right, because we're definitely interested in that. You want to tell people where you can get Matt Tales, the first book?
Sure. Matt Tales True Stories from the Bizarre, Brutal World of Pro Boxing. It's only available at Amazon, but it is available in Kindle or paperback.
Okay, and it's an entertaining book, especially if you're like me, and I'm getting older, and my eyesight's not as good. So you can sit down and read this book over like a month. You just take a chapter here, chapter there, because the chapters are usually only a few pages long, but it's really a fun read. And
yeah, that's Mike. That was my the idea I had for the book was just a fun read, just something like you and I just getting together and talking about. Hey, remember when Tomas Molinari's hit Marlon Starling after the bell? And that, and it's just kind of has that feel. And I just reached out to a lot of my friends, are professional referees and judges, and people from boxing commissions, and they share thoughts. And so it's just like we're doing now, just get together and remember these crazy things that happened. And so it turned out like that, and I'm really pleased with it.
See, I'd like to see a book on fighters that I can't find to interview. Because there's a few guys I can't find. You remember George Chaplin?
Yes, George Chaplin fought. Didn't he fight? Did he fight Jerry Cooney? No.
Yeah, he fought Cooney around 83, 84. But his claim to fame was he beat I thought he beat Greg Page, as did most people on ABC Wild World of Sports when Page was ranked number 1. But they either called it a draw or gave the other decision that way. I'm looking for him, and I'm looking for Lee Canalito. Do you remember him?
Lee Canalito. The name sounds familiar, but I can't place him.
He was a heavyweight that was actually managed by Sylvester Stallone and Burt Young. And his record was like 19-0, 20-0, like 18 knockouts, big white heavyweight. And then all of a sudden he just retired and disappeared, and nobody knows why.
Oh, wow. No, so you're trying to track these guys down?
Yeah, and I found a boxing gym in Texas that Lee Canalito was, I guess, the owner of, but I call it, and he don't ever return my calls. He obviously doesn't know how important I am.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I got a few connections in Texas boxing. I'll ask about him.
I do too. I just remembered Lou Savarese is down there, and Lou's been on our show a few times. I'd ask Lou.
I love Lou. Yeah, he came over to my house to watch. He was training here in Las Cruces to fight Holyfield, and I think it was it? Let me think here. Was it Zab Judah and Miguel Cotto? I think that was the fight. He came over to watch fights with us, and that was really cool to have him at the house.
Well, actually, him and Holyfield was a pretty good fight, even though they were both almost 50 years old.
It really was. Yeah, I was rooting for Lou all the way. I love Holyfield, but of course, I was rooting for my man Lou. But
I was rooting for both of them. I hadn't talked to both of them at the time, so I grew up. Holyfield won me over in like the '84 Olympics, and I think he got one of the biggest screw jobs ever there.
Oh, it's awful. Yeah, him and Roy Jones got cheated at the Olympics.
Yeah, but I don't care that Roy Jones got cheated.
Yeah, you're glad that Roy got.
Because watching HBO boxing, and Gennady Golovkin hits a guy. He starts swinging. The guy goes to his knee and he hits him, and then Roy Jones starts freaking out. If I'd have done that, if you watch Roy Jones against Montel Griffin was on his knee, and Roy swung and hit him twice. It was not the same thing, Roy. Maybe Roy has fought so long that he doesn't think straight anymore and doesn't know what happened. But he was justifiably, he lost that fight justifiably because you can't really crack him twice. And I've had Montel Griffin on the show, and we all know Montel acted it up a little bit. But it was a flagrant foul that had to be penalized, and it was. So Roy, shut up.
That's one. Maybe I'm going to think about putting that one in Matt Tales too.
Yeah, and the other one is this: when Roy complains about this crap and acts like the whole world was always against him. If you remember, he fought, or he gave up the WBC title or something. They gave it to Graziano Roccagiani. I think you know what I'm talking about.
I remember him.
But then they changed their mind and stripped Roccagiani and gave it back to Jones. So Roy Jones had more favor in his career than he didn't. And let's face it, he should have fought Darius Mikulchevsky. I don't think Mikulchevsky would have beat him, but from talking to Virgil Hill, guys like that had fought Mikulchevsky and Jones, almost every one of them to a man says Roy would have had his hands full, especially if it had went to Germany.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. In Germany, for sure. It was close. It would have really been a hands full.
Yeah, here's another Matt tale. I actually paid to watch the pay-per-view of Shannon Briggs against Francois Botha once.
Oh, are you serious? I should put you in Matt Tails for doing that.
Yeah, but it was actually a great fight. And Botha got screwed because Shannon Briggs did not beat him. But Shannon Briggs has hardly ever beat anybody. Except that one time he lost 11 rounds to Sergey Lyakovich, then landed that one lucky punch. But
oh, yeah. Shannon the Cannon. Yeah, he's a character, too.
He is a character. There's got to be something in one of his fights you can put in the book.
Oh, yeah. No, believe me, Mike, there's no shortage of characters in the sport of boxing.
And I'll tell you this, I think the best Matt tales is you went to the Olympic Auditorium. You remember Armando Muniz?
Oh, yeah.
His fight against Jose Napoli's is the biggest robbery in boxing history.
Yeah. I'm going to have to look at that one again. I know you got a big collection of boxing too, right?
Yeah, but go on YouTube and you can find actually an English version of that fight. And he cut the crap out of Napoli's. Napoli's is headbutting him. He's got the fight won. They're in the 13th round. Napoli's is getting ready his corner's getting ready to stop the fight. The referee jumps in, waves the fight off, goes to the scorecards, reads the scorecards, and then raises, Napoli's hand. And if you go to thegruelingtruth.net, John Raspani actually wrote an article a week or two ago about it. But if you get a chance, anybody that could go on YouTube, watch that fight because Armando Muniz should have been the champion off of that. And he was a great fighter, too.
Oh, yeah. Mike, I talked to Carlos Palomino once, and I just asked him, and I just said, hey, Carlos, who's the hardest puncher you ever fought? I guess it was Duran, right? And he said, what? He said, no way, not even close. So I said, well, who? And he said, Armando Muniz, man. He said, that guy could crack. That guy hurt me. And I was like, wow, okay. I hadn't thought of that.
Their first fight, the second fight was good too, but their first fight was an all-out war, and I think that was fought in L.A. I don't remember if it was at the auditorium or not, though.
Yeah.
I think it was either there or the sports arena, one of the two.
I saw fights at both of those as a kid at the sports arena, the LA Sports Arena, and the Olympic Auditorium. Well, it was a great time. Mike, when I grew up, Little Red Lopez and Bobby Chacon, just those two guys alone, it was just excitement all the time at the Olympic. It was
and the fight they had against each other was unreal also.
Yes, yeah, and that was like a huge showdown fight, kind of like in New Mexico, that version of that would have been Johnny Tapia and Danny Romero. This whole state was going nuts, Mike. I've never seen anything like it. There was old ladies fighting on airplanes over that fight. It was crazy. I'm telling you, it was.
Was it Tapia Romero you're talking about?
Yeah, Tapia Romero. They were originally going to have that in we always assumed it would be here in New Mexico at the football stadium or something, but they were so afraid that there was going to be trouble. So then they were going to have it at the Las Vegas Hilton. And then I think one of the Mike Tyson fights, there was trouble at the MGM Grand or something. So the Hilton pulled out. So here was this big fight with no venue. So they ended up at Thomas and Mack with, more cops than officials there, But the feeling in New Mexico was just, I've never seen anything like it. It was personal. People were willing to go to war over this, Mike. It was like a civil war in New Mexico.
Yeah, and the thing is this. Sometimes you get, if the Steelers are playing the Bengals or something, you get something like that. But it's not as personal as it is with two fighters. And just like the fights in Philadelphia, the fights at the Olympic Auditorium. A lot of people forget the Olympic Auditorium was the home for Jerry Quarry for most of the 60s also.
Yes, that's right, Jerry Quarry. Yeah, that's another good call. He was one of the greats that I grew up, enjoying watching too. I remember when Pedro Lavelle came out, and everybody was thinking he was going to be the next great thing, but, it didn't pan out.
Well, Ken Norton ended him, I think, on NBC.
Yeah, he did. He sure did.
And Pedro Lavelle looked more like a big I don't know, what did they call it, bouncer or something.
Yeah, exactly. Big doorman or something,
Is
right?
he still alive? Because if he is, I apologize, Pedro, because he was a big dude, though.
Yeah, exactly. You might have to run into him somewhere.
Yeah, I'm going to stay away from Pedro. Luckily,
Yeah.
he can't see my picture. We're not Facebook friends, so as long as he doesn't look,
Yeah,
like
okay.
all right. But if he is still alive, I would love to interview him. So.
Oh yeah. Oh my dad was crazy. He was all in for Pedro Lavelle, but it just didn't work out.
It happens.
Yes.
All right. Once again, give us where we can find your work, especially this book.
Sure, Mike. Again, it's Matt Tales, and it's available at Amazon.com by Dan Sisneros with an S, because most people spell Sisneros with a C. But my family were the ones that couldn't spell right, so we're. It's available at Amazon. It's in paperback or Kindle, so either way. And like you said, it's a short read. It's 32 little mini tales, and I think boxing fans will really enjoy it. I sure hope so.
Yeah, the only thing that could have made this book better is if you'd had some big color pictures in it.
Oh,
I like
okay. I'm going to tell my publisher that. Yeah. Fun.
But all right, Dan, thanks for coming on. I suggest everybody go out and get Matt Tales, True Stories from the Bizarre, Brutal World of Pro Boxing. Also want to remind everybody that sometime we'll have a weekly boxing show up. I don't know when, because Jeremiah's kids got sick. That's why we haven't done it so far this week. Also, in the future, I believe Monday we'll have Justin Hardy, who plays for the New Orleans Saints, so you want to check that out also. Tonight, we'll have Survive and Advance with me and former Indiana basketball player, 1981 national champion Steve Risley. We'll be talking to top 10 centers in NBA history. I want to remind everybody that you can find us on iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, soon to be Spotify. We're a few weeks out on that, and we'll be on there. So, for Dan Sisneros, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.